Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Peter Giannetti, Editor-in-Chief of Homeworld Business, and welcome to the second installment of the six-part webinar series presenting the first ever International Housewares Association Market Watch report. Once again, we have a panel of collaborators in the creation of the inaugural Market Watch, who will offer a revealing look into key consumer lifestyle trends identified by the report and how these trends intersect with the home and housewares business. Our panelists will highlight how these trends and the corresponding consumer attitudes and behaviors have been shaped by the COVID pandemic, and they'll outline implications for suppliers and retailers. Let's begin with an introduction of the Market Watch authors and today's panelists. We have Leana Salamah, Vice President of Marketing for IHA, Joe Derochowski, Vice President and Home Industry Advisor for the NPD Group, and Tom Mirabile, Principal and founder of Springboard Futures. We started the Market Watch series last Thursday with an interesting look at the concept of time as a primary lifestyle trend. So naturally, today's panel will examine the concept of space. Just a reminder, we'll leave time for the audience questions before the conclusion of each session. You may post questions using the Q&A function along the bottom of the Zoom window, and recordings of each session will be available soon after their conclusion at the Inspired Home Show website, theinspiredhomeshow.com. So let's continue the IHA Market Watch series with a look at space. Living spaces are not only becoming smaller and more urban as the composition of households is shifting away from the nuclear family. This dynamic is shaping the housewares industry profoundly. Products must fit consumer spaces as well as the evolving core needs of those occupying these spaces. But before we get to tackling the implications of COVID-19 on space issues, which we know are going to be quite significant, we're trying to frame the reason why space is a driving trend even before the pandemic began. And as we've said before, many of the trends we're discussing have been going on long before COVID. They've been accelerated and intensified during COVID. For example, the 2018 census referenced in the Market Watch report shows steep increases in non-family households since 2000. Joe, any idea what's causing that?
Well, if you look at the US Census, the data has been showing that the percent of non-family households over the last 30 years really has been inching up, but especially the last 10, where it's jumped up from the low 30% to up to 35% more of the households. And in part, if you look at the census, what's happening is the number of bodies by the different age groups and life stages are really more the pre-kids and post-kids phase of life. And so because of that, the second the kids are gone, do you need as much space? So we've seen over time that this has driven a lot of the urbanization that's been happening. As you see results, you see companies like I know here in Chicago, whether it's Kraft or Sara Lee or Motorola, and companies moving their headquarters into the city to be able to recruit the younger folks to go with it. You also see people who become empty nesters also looking forward to downsize and manage less space. So they've been moving more into the city as this happens in much more of the urban areas. And I think it's important because mathematically that demographic shift is only going to accelerate a little bit more. So this desire to have space-free living, for lack of a better word, is going to be very, very important during that period. And now for us, for the industry, it's important too, because the number of units are actually, there's more units bought by non-family household than households with families. So there is a business that's there because they're hitting some of those key life moments of first wedding, empty nester stage, retirement, things like that, or second places to live. So there's all these great life moments.
Well, and I think too, you have the change in the makeup of a nuclear family, they're the household itself, but you also have people downsizing or creating interesting living arrangements for a number of financial reasons, right? So over the past several years, some of the census data we looked at, household income, the rise in household income has not kept up with the rise in housing expenses, whether that's rent or whether that's mortgage. So you see people who are having to accommodate not only select smaller spaces, but think about non-traditional living arrangements. So there are more roommates right now beyond college than there have ever been before, who are continuing that type of lifestyle well beyond college. There are more multi-generational family homes where you have parents moving back in with children and children moving back in with parents. So all of that contributes to whether it's a smaller space or whether it's needing to do more with the space that you have.
Tom, you live in an urban area that's been going through gentrification in recent years. So you can kind of bring some firsthand experience to kind of what's happening in the urban environment. And it's important to know this is not just an urban phenomenon. It's happening in the suburbs and all over really, but it seems to have its understanding how the space is changing almost has its roots in this urban gentrification. Give us a little bit of your sense and how generationally this is a little different.
Well, I mean, I think first of all, to what both Joe and Leana spoke to, multi-generational homes represent almost 20% of homes now. So you've got kind of a shrinking middle in a way. You've got homes where there are more people than there were before and homes where there are less. Also, part of the statistics, that part of what's skewing things a bit is, by definition, a non-family household is one where the people aren't married. Like Leana said, you've got a lot of students living together after school rather than moving back in with their parents. I mean, in a lot of urban areas, you're seeing exactly what Leana spoke to, which is people sort of teaming up and living together and saying, okay, well, we can't afford a place of our own. We don't want to move back with our parents, and we want to work in the city. So let's move in together and find an alternate arrangement.
Right. So we start really with a situation where I think consumer awareness of space is as high as it's ever been. And I think more so the awareness of how to really optimize that space. And we're going to get into that, how that affects the home and housewares business. But now we throw in the kind of the COVID rationale and what has sort of changed in the last 3+ months. If that much has changed, are we more sensitive to it? I think as we get started, again, Tom has brought to this, and the team has brought to this idea of trend viability mapping. And what we started with a premise before COVID, and it's kind of evolved since then.
Before you go on, Peter, one of the reasons why space was a big trend and why we identified it even before COVID was there's a sort of a human sensibility. No matter where you are, you always want more space. Doesn't matter what size your home is, you always want a little bit more, and so space is always going to be a solution. That's why rational need, in the viability map, a trend viability map, by the way, is something that we created to sort of look at each aspect of a trend and say, how important is it to, how important is it to make that trend viable as a whole? So you can see rational need for space in American homes is very high. Globally, it's high. We always want a little more space than we have. That said, to your point, when you overlay COVID, there are some significant shifts.
We see the increases in generational relevance, trend longevity, and most significantly, aspirational value. Bring some sense to why that might be happening.
Well, from an aspirational value perspective, it used to be that space was something very much a rational thing. And now space is something that it's a very personal, I've got to have more space. I got to breathe. And especially now post-COVID, you've got work happening at home. You've got play happening at home. You've got schooling happening at home. I mean, Leana, take it away. You're living this every day.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've talked a lot about, the transition I've gone through, which is, a year ago, we tore down walls and made an open concept out of our first floor of our home. And I found myself over the last 3 months, sharing what is essentially one large room with myself and my 2 children as I'm trying to work and they're trying to do school. And, where I think that, when we put this report together, space was very much a pragmatic, just kind of reality, a physical need. And now when you look at it and you look at what space means to people, it means a lot of different things because you're doing so many different things in the home and you need to create the right environment for lots of different things all at the same time. And then you layer on top of that just this renewed focus that we're all seeing on people with the home and how they're, people are in a full nesting mode right now. They're redecorating and they're paying a lot of attention to what again was before a little more pragmatic. It was where you came home to eat and you came to sleep and you came to do what you needed to do. The amount of time that we're spending in our homes right now just makes everyone kind of reevaluate the space that they're in and what it really means to them.
Well, it's interesting. Space, and I'll address this to Joe. Space and the home in the last 3 months has evolved from starting out as sort of this protective shelter. But as we've gotten used to it, we don't think of it as much of as a shelter anymore, but it's a place to live. It's a and I use the expression it's gone from being a shelter to sort of an oasis or a sanctuary. Joe, what are your thoughts on this whole kind of changing of the landscape of space in the last 3 months?
Yeah, and part of it just working at home. I feel like I've seen everybody move from the back porch to the front porch. I mean, think of some of the people, if you're from a small town, you'll see people sit in the front yard so they can see cars driving by. I guarantee you all have probably seen in your neighborhoods more and more people sitting in the front so they can chat as people go by and watch the life as opposed to hiding back. So part of it is just wanting to have that connection. I think the bigger thing that's happened because of COVID though is because of what Leana and Tom said of working at home and spending more time at home, it's actually also now seeking more space. And so how it's accelerated some of those other trends, as we said last time, 5 years, I think it's doing the same thing from a movement where people now are starting to think about maybe I got to move back to the suburbs. Maybe I need to build a space for the kids and for the home. And I know an article today talked about how home sales in June was the highest month ever since 2008. So it's just a case where, is it causing, while we were heading a migration back to the city, is it maybe now accelerating and pushing the migration a little bit back out to the suburbs?
Well, are the home sales, if it was 20, 25 years ago, we saw all these McMansions going up and everyone was trying to upsize. And I think that was consistent with how the nuclear family was evolving at the time too. But do we have is there a reference out there in terms of what types of homes are going to be kind of leading the way? Is it smaller homes, starter homes, condos, apartments, those types of things?
My sense is it's everybody, if you think about it, 10, 15 years ago, when you went to look to a new home, you're thinking about, is the master bath fit what I'm trying to do?
Right.
In the last 5 or 7 years, it's really been, is the kitchen what I want? Can I entertain? Can I have this nice clean space? Have all this thing to be able to do it? I got a feeling coming here forward, is there enough room for everybody to work? Can the kids do their homework? Can I do my work? Can my spouse do their work? All that aspect is going to probably be elevated, and which to a degree, sadly, might de-emphasize the kitchen a little bit. Or is there a way it could accentuate it?
Well,
We got to be thinking.
Well, you see some
functionality evolve. Go ahead, Leana.
I was going to say, you see some different products coming out, right, that help to create more of a flexible environment within the space that you have. I think particularly about, both of my kids have desks in their bedrooms, but that doesn't mean that they can sit at those desks all day long and do their schoolwork, right? But, we've been looking at some of the products like the desks that fold down from the walls so that for part of the day, there's an environment for them to work in, but then you can kind of put it away. Right? So you can kind of create flexibility within a space that it can be one thing for part of the day and it can be something else in the latter part of the day.
Right.
It's going to be interesting when you think back to college coming up here. And sorry, Peter. When you think back to college coming up, what's going to happen when we're thinking of back to school, but what about those students that are going to do the e-learning? So now they're also going to need a workspace. So are you going to have to build something different? I think there's going to be a lot of still changes that happen in this area talking about space.
Yeah, and I think that leads to where we can start talking about product and this kind of, we talk about connectivity. Connectivity means so many things, but products from different categories are far more connected than they might ever have been as you start to consider the space. The relationship of a kitchen appliance to a cutlery block to a table setting, all these things start to interact. But what we've also learned is that an American society that for years was sort of disinclined for multifunctional product. It's just the way marketing sort of dictated the landscape rather than the consumer. But if you go through recent years now, there's been far more of an engagement and consumers embracing multifunctionality. And I think space plays a role in that considerably. So when you can combine 2 or more separate product functions. And so let's talk about kind of the idea of combination products and multifunctionality. I'll start with Joe on this one.
Well, a good way to think about it is if you're, especially if you're doing small space living or even beyond it, is we're eating 15% more dinners at home. We're eating 9% total meals across the day at home. As we're eating more of these meals, there's just going to be more of a pressure for diversity and changes what you have. So how do you have something that allows you to have a different food Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday for dinner, yet still be able to have the space? So while you're seeking variety, you're going to be needing some sort of a appliance that allows you to handle multiple needs. Or it could be within a meal occasion. If I'm having coffee in the morning, but in the afternoon, I maybe want a cappuccino or a cold brew, how can I make it, if I have limited storage, still be able to do the functionality for the different meal occasions throughout the day?
You know, and in addition to the, you know, the point you just made, Joe, about more meals at home, one of the things we talked about in the last session, in the time session, that I think is relevant is all of the, you know, newfound ways that people are spending time, right? We talked about the surge in cook and bakeware, because there's this, you know, that's how a lot of families are choosing to occupy their time, is by baking, is by cooking, you know, the toys and games and everything else. So, I mean, you know, all of that requires more stuff. So, you know, the more that stuff can either be multi-purpose, or the easier it is to store it and put it away in a way that's not disruptive to your space, I think continues to be really important.
Tom, consumers in previous generations may have resisted multifunctional products because they were concerned, A, that they don't do every function well, or B, if one part of that product breaks down, it sort of renders the rest of the product somewhat less valuable. Do you think consumers have a greater trust in products that solve more than one function at a time?
Oh, absolutely. You know, but I mean, the counter to that is, you know, it's got to be trustworthy. It's got to be, you know, you've got to have a product and hopefully a brand that supports it. But moreover, it's like, nobody needs another peeler. Okay. Nobody needs another, you know, another thing on their countertop. So to Joe's point, when we're done with something, you know, and this also, you know, talks to time in a way, we just want it to go away, you know? And so multifunction, because that room has to become something else, you know, it wants to become something else. So think about, you know, when you've got multifunction, you've got, you know, you've got a coffee maker that can act as a French press, or it can make a latte, or it can, you know, it can do any number of things. When you've got multifunction, it takes up less space, and that's most important right now. I mean, that's what the whole space thing is all about. You know?
Well, there's two functions of storage. One is if you're going to leave it out, it's got to look good.
Yep.
The other part of it is, if you're going to put it away, it has to be easier and take up less space to put it away. I don't know what's more important to consumers, but let's talk about the idea of storing in a compact manner, maybe whether it's on the counter or away from the, you know, in the cupboard or cabinet. Are manufacturers doing a good job of recognizing that it's one thing to use the product, it's another thing to make it easier to store and access? Leana, I'll start with you, Leana, on that.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I think that, you know, from kind of a, you know, when you look at nesting bowls and those types of things, you know, those have been around for quite some time. You know, one of my favorite products that I just recently picked up is a set of kitchen pots and pans that is literally designed to stack, you know, including the lids. I mean, I was just absolutely blown away, and it is my most treasured thing right now, because, you know, for years I've had that cupboard where you open it up and all the pans and the lids come flying out at you, you know, and it was just absolutely genius to me. So I think there's a real responsiveness to that right now, and thinking beyond kind of your traditional nesting bowls or stainless steel bowls and those types of things.
Tom, will that, if it doesn't solve that problem, will that dissuade a consumer at the point of purchase?
I just think it's low-hanging fruit. I mean, it's something that doesn't require, you know, you look at some of the people who are combining functions, and there's a tremendous amount of technology behind it, but just better design in terms of the space things occupy, that should be your first order of business, because it's not difficult to do, whether it's collapsing or nesting or you know, retracting. There are a lot of different ways to do things smarter, whether it's a, you know, whether it's a stick goods, a broom, or whether it's a mixing bowl set, or, you know, so I think that, I mean, people look at something and immediately they see it in their space. You know, you live in your head in your space when you shop. So I think it's a very easy visual story to tell. Now that storytelling has gotten more challenging, those types of things are really easy stories to tell. So it's low-hanging fruit.
Yeah, and some of those things, when you start to get into things like collapsible, what you're actually doing is you're combining, you're doing two things, right? It's storing in a compact manner, but you're also giving me something that can operate and function at two different sizes. So again, it takes up, instead of having to have two different size containers to store my food in, I can have one and it'll just adjust to what I need it to be when I need it. So you've almost combined the two. And then store it compactly, but it also performs the function of multiple things.
Right, right. Well, if function is a primary advantage when it comes to storage, functional storage, where does the idea of finding opportunities to make storage more attractive, beautiful? I mean, is the consumer going to give that more weight now than ever if there's a possibility that the product has to stay sort of in sight? Tom?
It's always going to be it's another box to check off. Okay. It's like when you look at stick goods companies, they're a great example. You have people sort of at the front of that. Maybe we're not supposed to name names, but Casabella does an amazing job of that. Okay. It's like, they've got great looking products, whether it's sponges or it's stick goods or it's, dustpan and brushes. And you pull that out and it makes it feel somehow less of a chore because it's just good to look at. It's fun. I think it's one of those things. It's a lever. It's a sales lever. Is it essential? Yeah, honestly, at this point it is, because function is basic. Function's essential. A broom's a broom, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I think
in appliances, which is one of the categories that's most likely to be left out, but there are also products that come with so many parts and accessories and attachments that you sometimes wonder what you're going to do with them all. So where does that middle ground kind of happen from a design standpoint in the appliance business?
Well, it's one of those things because you're still trying to manage the functionality and being able to do it in a way that looks good. A lot of times these things, it's still going to be the eye candy of the counter, right? When this stuff is out there, it's got to still be able to look good and help you tell the story that you have, yet the functionality is still going to have to be present. So how do we do all that? And that opens up the door for just remembering that when we add that functionality, that design element, to be able to still store those things or put those in a unique way to make it available and functional and save the space is going to be a critical factor. So I think that's part of it right there.
Peter, there are new people. I mean, there were new players last year and the year before who allowed the personalization of choose the handle you want on your major appliance, choose the finish. That's a game changer. So it doesn't have to be a small item to be able to make it attractive and to be able to make it a personal reflection.
And as you talked about there, the versatility, sometimes being able to change those handles out and change the looks that people have, or even just from a food storage of making it so in addition to the beauty and creating a look, but you can also make it fun or something, make it so the kids can draw in their own cereal box or come up with their own design or cereal ways to store whatever products that they have. Like there's ways that you can make it interactive and an experience that the consumer can get their own personal story out.
I think Leana said something earlier where people just don't want to accumulate as much stuff anymore. And the challenge, I think, or the opportunity with the industry is getting people to stop thinking of these products as stuff and more as objects and more as things that functionally and stylistically work within their environment, which adds value. And you have to integrate the idea of storage into that value equation.
Well, and for those things that are ultimately, we all have stuff, and for those things that does have to be, the stuff that has to be put away, I've absolutely fallen in love with some of the different storage options that are out there, just like, and the amount of personality that's put into some of just the decorative baskets and things that you can use to accumulate your stuff. If I have any clear bin at my house is like up in the rafters in the garage, but I have really cute storage all over the house where I hide all that stuff, that I don't want out and about, all those pieces and parts.
Think of Maria Kondo and all the impact that she's had of just organizing your house, organizing your kitchen, and all of that, and design plays a key role into it.
Remember, we talked about it last week, that all these trends sort of roll into one another. And, wellness is a trend that we're going to get to, but in organization and storage is the concept of wellness. Joe was sort of alluding to how it makes you feel better. It makes you feel happier, productive, and a happier consumer is going to be a more satisfied consumer right now. And again, we get sidetracked sometimes by thinking of features and not thinking of benefits. And the common theme throughout this is how these products provide a benefit to our lifestyles.
Peter, can I interrupt for a second?
Sure.
One of the things I just want to jump back to actually at the beginning, you had talked about different household types, and I'd encourage everybody to take a look at the main report that's available from the IHA, because there were 6 distinctive household types that, and this applies to all of them. I mean, one was affordable or shared or eco-friendly or flexible or stylish or healthy. There are 6 distinct identified household types, and it's really, really helpful because you need to see your customer in at least 2 of them. I mean, kind of the way to go. But it's important because it really tells you what are consumers looking for. It helps you sort of in a few bullet points say, this is what these households are. These are the people that we're selling to now, because it's very easy to lose track of things like when you're looking at objects all the time and you're comparing features and benefits, very easy to lose track of fundamental desires like time and space. I mean, that's what this is all about.
Yeah, and when we talk about, I mean, as I mentioned about flexibility and about rooms having to perform multiple functions now, throughout the course of a day, when it's easy to look at the images here and, you look at, combining the functions of 2 or more products, that feels very geared towards kitchen electrics, right? Or storing in a compact manner feels a little geared towards stuff we're trying to put in cabinets. But it's not just that, it is about, the fold out desks or the things that, you have out in the middle of your home that, you can collapse and put away, that, can come out when you're entertaining versus when you're not. So it really moves beyond kind of just what's in your kitchen cabinets and on your kitchen counters.
Yeah, furniture is a good example. I mean, that category, as it relates to what's going on in the home right now, I mean, your desk has to be on wheels. It has to be foldable, collapsible. At one point is a laptop station. The other point, it's a homework station. The other point, it's a TV dinner tray. I mean, it's doing all that work, and the consumer's so closely and intimately aware of every feature on that product and how it benefits them. And so it's integral across the entire spectrum of what we interact with in our homes right now.
One more comment on this, Peter, as I think in listening to what everybody's saying is, if you think about the kitchen of today, there's so few items that we want on the counter because we want this clean, sharp look. Leana just said her big kitchen, she's thinking about, I want a big kitchen to entertain as people have, yet her counter, she wants it to be very sharp and very clean. And we look at a lot of the product categories, even outside, whether it's in home environment or air purifiers, a fan, the design has always been about a sharpness and a cleanness that the consumer is kind of looking for. It's the current eye that they have. So part of what this storage is and part of what making it beautiful is that ability for them to still keep that. And part of that is leading to some sort of calmness. I'm in control of my house. It's a little bit place of relaxing, back to what you said within health and wellness. So there's just this criticalness that really is getting to not only the functional, but that higher order need that the consumer has.
So in city dwellings, you were asking about the effect on city dwellings. Many city dwellings de-emphasize the size of where our business is most important. They de-emphasize the size of kitchens. I live in a 1,800 square foot duplex. My kitchen is 10 square feet. And so every inch of space is important, and it's one of the few rooms I feel like I have to have control over what goes where, so it's, remember, especially when you're dealing with city dwellers and with people who can't afford a big place, younger consumers who are just moving into apartments or sharing apartments with other people, and they're sharing kitchen space and things like that. Space is always a premium.
But we often talk about space as it relates to the product design and how it interacts with the home, but it has a clear connection to how retailers present these products in store and in online. And our retailers, we need to figure out if retailers are giving enough kind of credibility to the idea that they need solutions, telling the vendor, we need solutions from a space standpoint in terms of presenting your products that are all about using space more efficiently. So you get into the idea of helping retailers merchandise their assortments, how a product fits on the shelf or maybe in a website, and also kind of how to manage online inventory in an in-store environment if you're going to be looking at in-store fulfillment of web orders. So let's talk in general about the idea of how Housewares, Home and Housewares product affecting space has to take into account the retail environment as well and how it fits in the retail environment. Leana, let's start with you on that whole idea of a product that has to fit inside the store.
Yeah, so I mean, I think there what you're talking about is, making sure that this, things like there's some low hanging fruit there, right? Just making sure that things like storage dimensions, are upfront. It's not just the size of the product, it's the size of the product at both full size and it's the size of the product in a collapsed state. So when you're thinking about merchandising and about, having the products on display, you may need to have it both ways so there's an understanding.
Right.
But one of the things I think is really exciting, as technology continues to advance and the retail experience adopts more of it, is this idea of consumers being able to use some kind of augmented reality to see things in their own environment, right? I mean, how many times you get something home and you're like, yeah, that doesn't work the way I want it to in the space. It technically fits, but it doesn't work the way I want it to in that space, So introducing things like augmented reality can help consumers, literally visualize it in their own home before they actually make the purchase.
Joe, is there any research, or Tom, is there any research out there that is suggesting how influential augmented reality and some of these new consumer online technologies are to transactions, to closing the deal and giving consumers more confidence in what they're purchasing on? I'm not sure if there is anything out there. Or do you have some general thoughts on the use of digital technology to solve space problems?
I think that I don't have specific data on it, but I can give you a perspective, which is we're visual learners in today's world, and where we're at a lot of times seeing something visual. And so the ability to help you connect and feel confident at the purchase decision and having no buyer's remorse, it really relies on that that this is going to work for you. And the advancement that has happened over the past 2-3 years with virtual and augmented reality is unbelievable. And it will continue down the road as we progress, even with 5G and that happening. So as that plays out, it can help the consumer not only sort the idea, but more importantly, just close the deal, make the decision, and get the products. There are so many times that we still see consumers struggle in different categories. Which one do I get? How do I do it? Do I need this or that? Do I need a multi-cooker, or do I need an air fryer? Do I need a robotic vacuum or a stick vacuum? How I struggle with all those things. There's ways that this can help you connect the dots towards your needs.
Well, often they abandon the cart when those decisions seem so complicated, and that's the worst thing that can happen, whether it's online or in a store. Tom, what are some of your thoughts on how we can help provide consumers with a lot of selection, but do it in a more compressed environment, if you will?
Well, I mean, I could speak very anecdotally to augmented reality and the use of it. Since I left this apartment for the first time, aside from walking the dogs and stuff, went into Manhattan for the first time from Brooklyn since March 15th last week. But that has not, thanks to augmented reality, I've bought 2 new rugs, 3 pieces of furniture, and almost a dog. But we can see these, you can see them right in your room. And the bottom line is I definitely would not have made those purchases without the use of that. So it's not just, I think that we tend to think of augmented reality as a nice to have. It's nice to have it. It helps close the deal. For me, and I think for a lot of people, it actually makes the deal. You're able to see something that you might completely pass by and say, let's see what it looks like, and then you hold it up when you're looking at it in your room and it's like, yeah, I like it. I think that it's really important. And also from the standpoint of, for a retailer, minimizing returns, really letting you try something out. It's enormous. It's an enormous tool, and definitely, worth the investment, I think, for the people who have started doing it. Also, boomers, I just want to say, augmented reality is something, those types of things have been very, there's been a lag in boomers adopting those technologies. The pandemic has forced a lot of boomers to dig in and say, I got to figure this out. I got to figure out Zoom, or I'm not going to talk to my family again.
Right.
And this has done more to free up boomer dollars and give boomers acumen in terms of shopping and expecting those augmentations than I think anything could have. I mean, Joe, do you agree?
100%. I mean, we see in the shopping that has occurred, and in part it began because they're the group that was most vulnerable to the virus, that their shopping really went online, and all grade age groups has. But it is this group that, as we continue forward, especially until there's some sort of vaccine that is created, there's going to be, are they going to continue to shop this way? And if they do, as they get more and more confident through doing Zoom meetings with their family and all that, they're just going to get stronger and stronger. Couple that with all that innovation that's happening with virtual and augmented reality, there's some innovation that's going to happen to help fuel that. One thing to forget about with this too is we also talked about, just even beyond that, of how open stock in places like this, one of the variables that we need to manage in a smaller space is a lot of times you're going to be only cooking for 1 or 2 people. So the number of meals that you eat for breakfast or lunch is going to be different, or even for entertaining. So the ability to personalize your space is another variable that's out there. And so I think we got to keep innovating. How do we be able to allow you to personalize your space, but yet still be able to get the full display that is out there? There's a real challenge in that plays out.
And I think that kind of goes into, the number 2 note here on the, retailer implications, which is this idea of bringing online inventory in store. And we talk about omnichannel. It came up at the last session. I'm sure it'll come up in any discussion we have about retail, but the ability to create kind of an endless aisle for consumers by being able to augment what's currently in store within the store's physical footprint with what's available beyond the store. And, at the risk of a shameless plug here, we were set to have a really, really cool display at the Inspired Home Show this year, which was a, kind of a retail of tomorrow kind of space where folks could go in and they could interact with products in, there were some augmented reality environments where you could take an item and put it into a table environment on a screen and it shows you what it looks like. But also the ability to go in and customize. So, okay, here's one product. Here's a food processor. And okay, I like this food processor fine, but right here on the store shelf, it's available in one color and that's it. But the truth is it's made in 30 different colors. It's not convenient for the retailer to stock all of those. And I can go in right here and I can say, no, I want this finish and I want this color and I want all of this, and order it right there on the spot from that, through that retailer, rather than go home and look it up somewhere else and see if I could find it differently. So it's creating that endless aisle where your inventory doesn't necessarily have to be the end of your offering.
I think the idea of endless aisle has evolved a little bit, where consumers want an endless aisle, but they also want quote unquote curation. They want somebody to help make decisions for them. And I think what's interesting to your point, Leana, is many years ago, people chose to shop in a store because they wanted the instant gratification of buying the product and cash and carry, if you will. And they went online understanding that it might take a few days to get the product. I think as e-commerce has shortened the delivery cycle, I think consumers are now far more accustomed to and actually acclimated to going into a store. If they don't have it, understanding I might be able to get shipped to my house tomorrow. So I think the environment is more favorable to a brick and mortar establishment, whether it's a retailer like Beta or others that have a broader assortment online that may not be available at that given moment inside the store, but the consumer's okay with it, and they're fine as long as they get that product within a day or two or however long it's going to be. Any other points on the kind of utilization of space in stores and online for that matter?
Yeah, I want to make one other point, and that is just, I don't want to forget about small businesses in here because, small business in my estimation is the next, they're the next heroes if they manage to survive this. But one of the things that I think it's incumbent upon us in the vendor community to do is to support the expansion of what they're able to show. We've got to enable drop ships for smaller companies. We've got to make sure that we're giving them the broadest possible assortment, and they're not just opening their doors to what they had when they closed in March. Right. And a part of that is the endless aisle. The endless aisle can happen in any size store, but we need to develop technologies that we can let smaller businesses plug and play, because it still allows, to your point, curation, Peter. It's like I can have the whole the whole line of any given cookware line. I can have the whole Calphalon line, but for my customer, I might say, I'm going to offer just these 3 SKUs. So how can I show that in tablet format, while you're in store,
Well, I think the curation is used to inspire and the endless aisle is that kind of, but wait, there's more. So and it kind of satisfies people on multiple levels. The idea of, we talked about this a little earlier, that the retail environment, whether again it's a digital or an in-store environment, has a responsibility to be able to show consumers, build consumer trust in a multifunctional product, or in a product that has a little bit more complexity to how it solves problems. And again, do you see retailers equipping themselves with that beyond augmented reality, but really laying down all the rationale for why this product is good for you on many levels, not just helping you save space, but in doing so, delivering you high performance value? Joe, start with you on that.
Well, I think one of them that we talked about at the beginning of, you got multi-generational homes being another thing that is out there, that houses that we are trying to build products for. So how do you make it if, yes, somebody who is younger is able to use it, but your grandfather is not able to use it? We've all tried to do a Zoom meeting, I'm sure, during these breaks. And at some point, you're going to find somebody who just struggles to be able to get at that. So how can you make sure that once the product is purchased, that everybody can use it in a multi-generational household?
Does the vendor shoulder more of the burden in doing this now than the retailer?
Well, I think it's a little bit of both. It's a collaboration of both. I mean, certainly the manufacturer has to be able to help on that end, but you still have to sell and close the product. And that might be something that really connects the dot and pushes something over the edge. And that could be in the aisle there. So the ability to be able to tell that story in the aisle or at wherever the point of purchase is going to be important, that to let them know we can help everybody be able to use this product in the household. And some of the multifunctionality naturally brings an actual technical capability that you got to manage through, and it's a responsibility of both parties.
It may be as simple as product demonstrations, just so that you can actually see and experience the simplicity of, using this product, and the acknowledgement that, it can work across multiple skill sets. It may be that simple, on the retailer side, to say, okay, we're gonna actually do product demos in order to get this across. If they can't do something that's, packaging.
I agree, that's good old fashioned merchandising, but in today's day and age, that also adds a line to the cost ledger, and that's why it becomes a little bit more challenging. But the technologies you've alluded to earlier sort of help bridge that gap and bringing some of those variables to the store. But yeah, good old fashioned demonstration seems to work. Tom?
Well, I mean, a part of it, both in terms of, pre-purchase demonstration, but I think a big part of this too is after purchase service. And we addressed this a little bit when we were talking about time, but Dyson, amazing example. There is like 9 times out of 10, the things that you never thought you could fix with your vacuum, you go on and they have got to talk you through tutorial of what's it doing? What's the problem? Tell us in your own words what's happening. It's not doing this or it is doing that. And whether it's overheating or things not spinning right, and they will talk you through all the way to, what, this isn't something you're going to be able to fix. Let us send somebody to you but 8 times out of 10, you can fix it yourself, and I think that just real world help after the purchase is just as important as the helping you make the decision pre-purchase.
There's a question we have from our audience that speaks to the multifunctional issue that we're talking about now. And it's interesting. It's a startup that wants to know, how can a startup in today's climate get more exposure to their buyers for new multifunctional products, especially in an environment now where retailers to kind of manage risk are probably not as inclined to open their doors to a lot of new suppliers while they try to fill the pipeline again heading into the holiday. But how does a startup, and startups are kind of driving a lot of the new innovation across this industry, how do they get attention for something else? What do they need? What's their minimum cost of entry, if you will, to getting a fair shot in this business? Tom, your thoughts?
You're talking a manufacturer startup, right?
A manufacturer startup, yeah.
Okay. I mean, for me, one of the things, you look at some of the great startups, look at Nest, it's like, here's somebody who came out of nowhere and just focused on the fact that, stop worrying about touching that thermostat and jiggering with it. Let us learn. So a lot of times technology is a great inroad to just letting people give you a chance. There must be, I don't know what your solution is, but if you're not starting with a strong consumer focused solution, then you're at a disadvantage right off.
Leana, you have something?
Yeah, I would, certainly, 4 months ago, I would have said, a trade show is your best possible environment to get in front of people, to demonstrate new products. And certainly at the Inspired Home Show, we had and will continue to have in 2021 a lot of ways to highlight those types of things. One thing I might suggest just in the short term, as we're waiting for all of our industry gatherings to kind of come back, is to look into influencer marketing and look into, trying to find aggregate people, who you can share the product with and allow them to try it out. But that then they can help become a mouthpiece for you to drum up demand and interest in it, so that when we do come back around and we're back into, full trade show and face-to-face mode, in that product discovery mode, you've got some traction underneath you already.
Joe, some thoughts on that? I'm getting in the door.
Well, I think the first thing is we're in a great environment for it, in the sense that if you think of all the things battling for the consumer's mind, we had so many things heading into the pandemic, whether school, kids' activities, sports, or whatever. There was such a battle to find a space. And right now there's actually less of it because of it. So a chance for a brand to get their story out is important. So then they need to do exactly what Tom said, which is have your story talk about the need or the frustration or the pain that you're solving for the consumer. And then you got to be experimenting on the different techniques to get that share of mind. Part of it could be through influencer marketing. Part of it could be other social media metrics that are out there to be able to get through that space to get to the consumer's mind. But the key is you've got to be able to get the mind first. Once you get that, then the sales will follow. I think the stores are going to follow with it. And most retailers are all trying to dial up their ability to not only just do in-store, but also online. So to meet the consumer exactly where they're at. So there is a place, you just have to be prepared for the full story.
Also, one other thing I'll put out there. It's a great environment to sell your product also to existing brands. If all this sounds like, oh my gosh, I've got a great product, it's pretty much a singular item. You know what? There are, I'll tell you, put it on a crowdfunding site. Some of the most amazing recent housewares items have come off of crowdfunding sites where you may not need the money, you may be already set up, but I'm just telling you, there have been some amazing things like Prep Deck. Again, I'm not supposed to name names. Here's an amazing product that started out crowdfunding and people just saw it, just basic consumers, and vetted it so that Prep Deck was able to come into the industry and say, look at this, we asked for this much money. People thought the average Joe on the street, no insult intended, Joe, said that this was such a great idea that we got funded this when we asked for this. And that was a real vote of confidence to get a manufacturer to pick it up.
Yeah. They have today's startups have access to the consumer like startups never did before, just as large companies have access to the consumer. And crowdfunding, yes, the word funding is embedded into it, but it's really about mining information, understanding your consumer and getting feedback. So with that in mind, in terms of options available to startups, yes, trade shows when they're back and rolling, trade magazines are great options. Market research companies are great options to get a little insight from, and find consultants who understand the market. So I just represented all four of us on this.
I was just going to say,
so I thank you. We again, we covered a lot of ground right now. Leana, why don't you explain to the folks again how they can get their hands, or what you're doing to make sure they have access to the Market Watch report?
Yeah, absolutely. So everybody who has attended this session or who attends any of our 6 sessions will receive a follow-up email that has a link where you can download the full Market Watch report. Recall that part of the reason we're putting this webinar on now is because things have changed, so you'll see some things in there that, you're hearing some things on these webinars that aren't necessarily in the report. So they're certainly supplemental, but you'll receive a link for that, as well as a link to the next session, which is this Thursday at 1 p.m. Central, and that is on experience. So the same group of 4 here will go through kind of the experience trend and what that means and how it's evolved. And in addition, in that email, there's more information on the IHA, on the NPD Group, and on the Springboard Futures.
I want to, before I formally wrap up, I want to reference something that many of us will have remembered. And the point I'm making is that we're talking about the future right now in the present tense. And we are someone's future. If you go back into the 50s, the classic Honeymooners episode, where Ralph is selling the Chef of the Future, which was, you know, a do-it-all kitchen gadget. And the biggest question was, does it core a apple? And my point is, we sometimes get lost in what really constitutes innovation. How progressive does it have to be? Sometimes the solution is standing right in front of you. Your future is really looking you in the eye, and you just have to take some time to stop and think about it. We've been forced to look at it very closely again with what's going on the last 3 months. And fundamentally, we are now mapping out the next chef of the future as we go forward. So there's no right answer and there's no wrong answer. We'll know once we get there, though. I want to, on behalf of Leana, Tom, and Joe, I want to thank you all for joining us today. We will see you Thursday afternoon when we're going to be talking about experience, which is a word that has been used often in the last several months and last several years. So we'll kind of pull that together. Until then, we wish you all a good day, and hopefully you'll find your happy space tonight. So thanks very much. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.